So here we are with our base plan back on the table, and we're just going to work on the backyard area just for the demonstration of how this works. So what I like to do is to remember that each of these threshold places will need a certain amount of room. So I might put one of these 8-foot circles. So you can see we've cut them out, they're about 8 feet across. Where the thresholds are, the doorways anyway, and just have those in place. And then what we might do is go through our landscape idea planner and realize that we have some things that we would like to have in the garden. So one might be a water feature with a pond. We might want a fire pit, a patio, some garden boxes. Maybe we want a compost or a wood pile. So each of these circles is about 12 feet across. So I'm just assuming that that's kind of the thing itself, like the fire pit with some pavers around it, or the patio, or the water feature. They might be taking up about 12 feet of space. So we're not just going to bunch them all up together like this. We're going to have each of them with a little bit of space around them that makes the room for them. So sort of like we saw in the pictures, a thing in the garden isn't complete if it's just sitting there all by itself, like the bench was on that one person's walkway. It needs to have some context around it. So it could be that the garden boxes are going to be over here up against the wall near the tap. And we might say, well, this is the context of the garden boxes. They're in this zone. And a patio space, we don't always put them right beside the garden boxes. So in this case, they might go this direction from the front, or the back door rather, and be tucked in around the lilac, or maybe it's a little bit over here. So what you're going to find as you manipulate these circles is that there's going to be a certain distance that feels right. So a patio with a barbecue on it, for example, we generally like to have it fairly close to the back door because it's well, winter around here. It's pretty nasty, so we would want to have the barbecue kind of close to the back door. So there's going to be a zone where we feel like it's starting to feel too far away from the house. I like it a little more handy, so we're gonna choose maybe to put it right here underneath the lilac. And again, the patio doesn't live in isolation. It's going to have its own zone around it. And you can see that where it overlaps with the garden boxes, we start to have this little zone overlap. You can see it showing up right there, right in this spot. And that will be where a transition happens. I call that the wall between the rooms. So we have these two rooms, and where they meet can either be a doorway, but it's often a wall. It's like, how can we create a little bit of separation between these two rooms? And what is it that we would do right there? So for now, we'll just let that zone float around here and just stay in our awareness. So looking at what would we do next? Maybe a fire pit. Now a fire pit is one of those things that definitely people will have a sense of what feels too close to the house. Yep, going to burn it down. What feels like underneath the wires, not good. And then as we go over here, there will be a feeling of this is too far away, needs to be back here a little bit. And the way you decide this is exactly how I'm showing you. You're just kind of rolling it around, and it's like just kind of feeling into your interior self and say, is that feeling good? So there's going to be a spot where it just kind of lands. And around the fire pit, we might say we're going to have some grass. And the thing itself does not always have to be centered right in the middle of its room. It can be a little bit offside, and then what's left is perhaps grass or more pathway or something going on in there. So you can see right here the transition zone between these rooms is starting to show up. So again, if we lifted off these room zones, we've got these things in the garden that we'd like to have, a fire pit, garden boxes, patio, but they don't feel connected. They don't feel like they relate to each other until we overlap the realization that each one has its own space and its own room, and they're having these overlaps. So if your circles aren't touching on your plan, you need to decide what it is that's happening in those areas, because if they're really far apart, it's like, what is going on right here? Is it just grass? Is it nothing? There has to be something going on. So that's why these bigger concepts kind of work really well. So over here, we might choose to put the compost wood pile over here behind the lilac. And again, it has its own space. And this space might actually be connected to this back walkway. Just depends on what's going on there. So now we can see that the lilac is acting as a transition plant between the patio and the compost area. We might need to even reinforce that a little bit. We might do some screening. This is a little squiggle line. Again, I just put it on some transparency. And we can say, I might do a little bit of extra screening here. So there might be a little fence panel that goes on back here. And same with between the garden boxes and the patio here. We might say, well, let's do some screening. And maybe I would like to do some screening in between us and the neighbor, and also us from the backyard, the back lane. So there could be a little bit of screening that happens somewhere like this. So now we're starting to get a sense of how the whole property is relating to each other.